What's up, everybody? Welcome to Bios3 Raw TV. Well, it seems to be a little bit of confusion between or about alternative fuel sources. Now, when I say that, I'm not talking about... Here comes bro. When I say that, I'm not talking about for your car or your barbecue grill or anything like that. What I'm talking about is alternative fuel sources for your body. Now, what the fuck am I talking about? Okay, here we go. If you're training to get bigger, essentially you want the fuel that you're using to be, while you're training, while you're recovering and stuff like that, carbohydrates and fats. Okay, and the idea is you want to have just enough surplus protein-wise to make sure that your body has enough protein to synthesize new muscle tissue, which is only going to take place as fast as your genetics will allow. If you overdo the carbohydrates and fats while you're doing this, you're going to get fatter. But you still want to fuel your body with carbohydrates and fats, which are fuel sources, and make sure that the ones that you're taking in are the ones that are used for fuel, okay? So, because you're not on a cut, so you're not looking to lose body fat. Now, if you're on a cut and you're looking to lose body fat, your main source of fuel you want to be as much as possible, okay, which is not all the time, but as much as possible is, let's shut this message off, it's fucking with me, is fat, body fat, triglycerides. If you're in keto, you want to burn ketones. Bottom line is you want fat to be your main fuel source, okay? You don't want carbohydrates to be your main fuel source all the time. You want to have carbs most of the time, unless you're in keto, during your workouts to fuel the workout to be hard enough to spike your metabolism or cause muscle growth. And you're definitely not going to want to include anything on a cut that is an alternative fuel source, which means it's not the carbohydrates you're eating and it's not the fat sources you're eating. Now, to me, what an alternate fuel source is for your body is branched chain amino acids as well as MCTs, medium chain triglycerides. These are two sources of fuel that your body will use that is easier to use than fat. Okay, it's easier to break down and use for energy than fat. If your body has a choice of using fat or BCAAs or using fat or MCTs and it uses one of those two sources, it's not going to burn them both. Or let's say it does burn them both, it's going to greatly reduce the amount of fat that's burnt during that period of time. So why would you add something? It doesn't make any fucking sense to me at all why people would add another fuel source that your body could latch onto and use faster and slow down the progress. It makes zero sense. But, you know, over and over again, I see people, they're like, oh, should I take my BCAAs during cardio? Why the fuck would you take your BCAAs during cardio? Why would you want to give your body an alternative fuel source? I mean, you're going to burn carbs, fat, maybe some proteins during that cardio to begin with, but the little bit of fat that you may be burning during and afterwards, which is really the most important part, and you're adding BCAAs, your body's going to burn that. It's going to make the glucose from those aminos. That's how it works. So you see, anytime you add anything into your body that's hard for it to do, it's going to find the easiest source, first of all, that it can use to use for fuel. Now, the MCTs, although they're a fat, they call it the fatless fat, which is fucking retarded, included in coconut oil and all kinds of shit like this. And there's MCT formulas that people use. And people go, wow, you know, I cut my carbs out and I add MCTs. You're giving it the same fucking source of fuel. Although it's technically made from a different macronutrient, it burns just like a fucking carbohydrate. So the fact that you're giving it something that's easier to burn than fat, you're not getting leaner any faster. You're slowing down your fucking fat loss. It boggles my mind how we're going into, like, I mean, how many years have fucking MCTs been out? Shit, I mean, I was trained in probably 1995, 94, 90, about 1993, I remember the big push, which was Captri oil that was out, and there was a bunch of different companies doing MCT oils when it came out, because it was something new, and that was the thought process. Wow, cut back on carbs, add MCTs. Cut back on saturated fats, add MCTs. Now, I understand where the cut back on fats and add MCTs came from then. What they came from was, if you're cutting back on saturated fats, and I believe that you should have saturated fats as well as polyunsaturated, etc. You should have a good blend of fats in your diet. You know, not all coming from one source, but I also believe that you should have a blend of everything carbohydrate-wise as well as protein-wise from different sources too. That's just my take on it. I'm very bro like that, and it makes a lot of sense to me. Maybe it is important, maybe it's not, but it works for me, and macronutrient, micronutrient-wise, it makes very logical sense. Now, if you're taking in olive oil compared to, let's say, butter, a saturated fat, the olive oil is actually easier to break down and use for energy, to digest fat-soluble vitamins, to make hormones through cholesterol, testosterone and stuff for the basis. Cholesterol is the basis of those hormones. it is easier to break down and use the olive oil, and is much less likely to store olive oil as fat than it is something like a saturated fat. Although they're both fat, the breakdown and the way that the body uses them are two different ways. So now, when the MCTs came out, they were like, oh, cut down on your fats and add the MCTs in, and all of a sudden you have a new, a new way to burn a fuel that's a lot easier. Okay, that makes sense. But then when they started figuring out that olive oils and fucking messages, olive oil and things like that, and macadamia nut oil and stuff like that, were actually easier to burn as a fat, and still harder to burn. Still harder to burn than a carbohydrate. Well, that doesn't make any sense to use the MCTs for that purpose anymore. Olive oil can actually take the place of that MCT rather than putting the MCT, which is easier to burn. So now, to me, MCTs don't have a place in the diet anymore. Okay, before they figured this other shit out, I understand where it came from and all that, talk about the MCTs. But the bottom line was, the reason why everyone doesn't fucking use it and it's not that popular anymore is because it didn't work as fast. Sometimes it didn't work at all. Now, remember that a lot of calorie in, calorie out guys will tell you it's all about calories. Now, granted, you cannot be too far over your calories and still lose fat. You cannot be under your calories too far and still gain muscle mass. Of course, calories have something to do with it, but the hormonal manipulation of the food, hormonal manipulation from the food is what's very important. Now, your body is absolutely going to tap into fat stores a lot faster if it has to. But if it doesn't have to, it's not going to. So stuff like BCAAs and MCTs, not so much the MCTs, I'd say the BCAAs, if someone is bulking, that's when I usually recommend the BCAAs. And I recommend them more so, which is interesting, is I've been using them like Rich Piana has been using them for a long, long time. I actually take the BCAAs and I throw them in my jug of fucking water and I sip them throughout the day in my jug of water for extra amino acids. I've been doing that for a long time. I also did that with glutamine until I found out that glutamine can actually be broken down into, what the hell was this? Jesus Christ. It's a brain fart right now. But anyways, it gets broken down into a toxic chemical, ammonia. That's what it is. It can actually be broken down into ammonia, which can actually be bad for you. So obviously you don't want to let glutamine sit in the water too long. And stuff like creatine, you don't want to let sit in the water too long because it breaks down to creatinine and then doesn't fucking work. So the idea is some of those nutrients can be used while they're bulking. Some of them can be used in fat burning. If you're gonna, there was a product on the market. What the hell was the name of that company? There was another BCAA formula. People are actually taking food protein out and adding the BCAA formula in, replacing food, which now you don't have all your amino acids, so it made no fucking sense and it didn't float. So there's so many things out there that, are based on, this works like this works like that, science is this, science is that, and they twist all the science and everything to get what they want to sell their product. And that's what it is, selling the product. So for me, adding an alternative fuel source while you're trying to fucking burn fat, no matter what company is fucking selling it, is bullshit. Biohackertraining@gmail.com. Leave comments down below, but don't fight. www.biohackertraining.com is a blog and where it's the no using BCAAs while you're dieting bicep, just while you're bulking bicep, and we're out.